always told our children when we were growing up, listen, if you lie, you get double in trouble. I mean, you get in trouble for doing whatever you did wrong, but then you get in trouble for lying. Just tell us the truth. I would prefer the truth over a lie any day. As we used to tell our children, liars are friars. Look up Revelation. You'll see that exactly at the end of the book. But I would rather have them tell me the truth. I just cannot stand when people lie to me. I don't know, maybe you're like that too. You would rather just, even if the truth may be painful and you didn't necessarily want to hear it, it's better than a lie. Because there's just something about a lie. We know that people lie because they're afraid. We understand that. They're afraid of getting caught. They have done something wrong, and so when they're confronted about it, they try to cover it up and they lie about it because they don't want to get in trouble. Their deeds, what they did in the darkness, has become light, and they don't want to hold up to it and be accountable for it. So they're out of fear, they lie. People also lie to make themselves look better. Look at any man trying to pick up a girl. He tells her anything he possibly can that she thinks or he thinks she will believe. And they're mostly lies because he wants to pick her up. And really, this is also a fear. It's a fear that the man doesn't think he is enough in and of himself, so he needs to lie to make himself look better. It's also a fear. People lie also to manipulate. They want to manipulate us. They fully well know the truth. They're not necessarily trying to cover up the truth. They're lying about what is true so that we will change how we view the truth. Now, honestly, governments throughout history have been very good at this. They'll manipulate the truth because for them, it's not important what the truth is. It's important what the perception of truth is. So if the populace perceives something to be true, it's okay. And what they have done is they've redefined truth. Truth no longer is truth. It becomes what you perceive to be truth, all therefore relative. When someone lies, they disrespect the truth. The truth as a body, that absolute truth that we know that exists. When you lie, you disrespect the truth. Lies are shifting sand that have no stability. There is no stability in lies. We need truth for stability. We need truth for marriages, to have stable marriages. We need truth in society to have a strong and stable culture. We need truth in relationships so that they can be strong. Truth is that bedrock that we build a life on, a society on, a marriage on. And without truth, whether it's a life or a marriage or society, it's doomed to failure if truth doesn't exist. It will crumble. It has happened before, and it is happening now. This morning we're going to be in Psalm 139. So if you'll find that in your Bible, Psalm 139. We're not going to pick up at the very beginning of the psalm, but as you're finding it, let me kind of give you an overview of this psalm quickly up to the point where we're at. This is probably one of the most glorious of all the psalms of the Psalter, all 150 psalms. This is one of them that is just the most theologically rich, the most that just has the content in it. David's the author. We don't know exactly when he wrote it. It's not really that important. It seems to be perhaps later in his life. There's a sense of maturity about it. Could be. It's not necessary, or God would have told us when he wrote it. But it has such clear teaching on important truths, and it's broken down in verses of 6. Verses 1 through 6 is basically that God knows everything. In other words, God knows my thoughts. God knows when I lay down, when I rise up. In fact, he knows the words that come out of my mouth before they come out of my mouth. That's verses 1 through 6. God knows everything. That's his omniscience. He knows everything. Verses 7 through 12 deal with God's omnipresence. That means God is everywhere. Wherever you would go, God is there. You cannot go anywhere that God is not. God is everywhere. His omnipresence. He is everywhere. You cannot hide from him, is the idea in verses 7 through 12. When we come to verses 13 through 18, which we're going to look at today, we see God's power, his omnipotence, his creative power as he's working a marvelous wonder, fearfully and wonderfully. So here in verses 13 through 18, then we see 19 through 22, David's basically saying, your cause is my cause. God, I'm on your side. Whatever you want, that's good. I'm on your side. I'm for you. And then the last two verses kind of sum up a thought that David has, concluding the whole verse. We're going to jump in the middle of it. Verses 1 through 6, we've already seen that God knows everything. Verses 7 through 12, we see that God is everywhere. You can't hide from God anywhere. Now we're going to pick up in verse number 13 and read 13 through 18 totally today. Let me read to you 13 and then the first part of verse number 16. For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. David says right here clearly to us, I am designed by God. God designed me. The verse 13 where it says for, that means he's picking up a previous thought, and that is that God is everywhere. There's no place you can go and hide from God. So when David transports us from the world around to the very place of the mother's womb, he is saying basically, you can't even hide from God in the mother's womb. God is there too. For, that's verse number 13. Points us back to that previous thought. So even the formation of a baby in a mother's womb is not hidden from God. God sees it. God is present. God knows what's going on. God designs that baby in the mother's womb. David here so delicately and beautifully describes that process that God works within that special place, that mother's womb. For even in the darkness of the mother's womb, God was present for David and saw him. You saw me in my mother's womb. You formed my inward parts. He's working his marvels here in this place that's unseen to human eyes, but known to God, hidden to us, but not hidden to God. And the ancient Jews themselves looked at the development of a child in the mother's womb as a great mystery, and it truly is a great mystery. In Ecclesiastes 11:5, we read, as you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. It's just a great mystery how a child develops in a mother's womb. It's fascinating. Well, why is it fascinating? Because God has hand in it. It's beautiful. He prescribes a custom design for each person here in the mother's womb. And you notice it says, for you form my inward parts. And we're thinking, okay, inward parts, that's stomach and your intestines and your spleen. You know, parts are parts. Well, that's not really what it's talking about. The Hebrew word here has the idea of kidneys. And you're thinking, okay, well, those are parts too. Well, no. The kidneys in the Hebrew way of thinking has the idea of the seat of sensation or the seat of desire or feeling or the inner nature of a person, or we would say a personality. So we see right up front, David is saying, you formed my personality. Exactly how I was supposed to be, whether I'm outward going or inward going, a little bit reserved, more outward, however it is, God, you formed my personality. Right from the beginning, God, you were there. You formed it. We see clearly from the text that human personality exists before the baby comes out of the womb. All of you ladies who've had more than one child, are they ever the same? You're shaking your head, no, they're not. There seems to be this personality because it is true. You formed my inward parts. You made my personality while I was still in my mother's womb. Before I even came out and saw the light of day, God, you gave me my personality. You formed my inward parts. He knows us before we're even born. He works together, we see here, like a master weaver. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. You knitted me. You wove me is the idea. Like a master artist who labors in secret until his masterpiece is finished, God labors and weaves us together in the mother's womb. Sometimes weavers would take gold and silver and put it into the fabric as they're weaving a piece of fabric, and when the garment is finished, you look at this garment and you're saying, wow, that's awesome. And that's the idea here, is God weaves us together. When we stand back, we look and we say, wow, that's awesome, God. You did a great job on that. Thanks. And David's response is in verse number 14, the idea of him being wonderfully and fearfully made. He said, I praise you. God, thanks. Thanks for making me just like I am. Thanks for taking enough time to even care about me in my mother's womb and giving me the personality that I have right now. Thank you, God, for caring. I mean, think about it. I'm not even a doctor. Think about how wonderfully we are made, the human body. I mean, how often have you gotten calluses on your hands from working hard? Now, I'm a student, so I don't get many calluses. But you know what I'm talking about. I get them occasionally. When they turn to blisters right away on me because these hands turn pages in books, they don't shovel snow very often. I take that back. I've shoveled a lot of snow this winter. But our hands are wonderful. We get the calluses, and then they peel themselves off, and pretty soon they're back to the way they used to be. Could you imagine if our hands were made out of marble or iron? After a period of time, our hands would begin to wear down, wouldn't they? Marble rubbing against itself would wear itself down, or iron, the same thing. But our hands renew themselves even till the day that we're dead. Our hands keep renewing themselves. And I mean, not even to talk about the eye, or the way that the brain works, or how it all functions. I mean, I don't have to say, okay, Mark, breathe. Exhale. Mark, breathe. The brain takes care of that all for me. I don't have to even think about it. Heartbeat, beat. Heartbeat, beat. I mean, the brain, it's just amazing. The brain, and I'm not even a doctor. You get a doctor in here, he can tell you all kinds of things, how wonderfully and fearfully we're made. It's just an awesome thing the human body is. It's just beautiful. He wove those parts together, the bones and the muscles and the arteries and the veins and the nerves and the fiber, like this master weaver. He just wove it all together because he was there. He was right there. He was present. My frame was not hidden from you. My skeletal frame, what I was going to be, my height, how long my fingers are, how long my toes are, the length of my legs, all my frame was not hidden from you. You knew exactly what I was going to look like. When I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Now, David's not saying, I came to being in some cave. That's not what he's talking about. It's a metaphor for the woman's womb. His mother's womb. The depths of the earth refers to this womb. It has the idea of a place that's protected. It's a place that's secure and safe. It's wrapped up in this word. The depths of the earth. This place in the mother's womb is a very special and secure place. It's protected. Here, as you wove me together, your eyes saw my unformed substance. Has the idea of something being rolled up and wrapped together. It's the embryo. It's that which will unroll and unwrap, and when the time is right, come into this world, and we'll see exactly what it was. But God knew exactly what it was going to look like while it was still rolled up and wrapped. You saw my unformed substance. God, you were right there in the womb. You saw it all. He's saying basically in my very first hours of life, of days of life after conception, when I was still wrapped up in embryonic form, God was watching over me. Designed by God, fearfully and wonderfully made. The rest of verse number 16, now David launches into this fact, since God was in my mother's womb, I wasn't hid from him. He wove me together. He made me. He gave me my personality. He gave me my structural form, my skeleton. Now the last part of verse 16. In your book were written every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there were none of them. He says, listen, not only did you design me, God, you determined my days, all of my days. Before David uttered his first cry from his mother's womb, God had already ordained his days. They were already recorded by the divine creator, all of the days. Now, I don't know if that means the extent, the days of his life, or the substance of his life. Both of them are wrapped up in this, ideas wrapped up in this. Not just the days, but the substance of everything that David is going to do in his life is wrapped up in this idea. You knew my days. Everything. Before I had shape or form, God did see what I was to be, David said. God knows all the days that are ahead of us. That's actually a very comforting thought when you think about it, isn't it? He knows what tomorrow brings. Next week, 10 years from now. He knows exactly what's coming up, and he can prepare us now for that which is coming in our future. I'm glad God knows my days before they've even happened. This means I can trust him daily when he's working in my life. Even if I'm going through a severe trial in my life, I know that God knows. I know he knows. He knows all of my days. They're already pre-recorded before I was even born. That moves David into the next phase. I was designed by God. He determined all of my days. He wove me in the mother's womb. He gave me my skeletal form. He gave me my personality. He put everything into place. He was present in my mother's womb. Then he ordained every day before I was even born and counted all of them and knew them all. Now verse 17 and 18. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. If I would count them, they are more than the sand. I awake, and I am still with you. David now moves to this point and says, listen, God has delight in me. God has delight in me. I'm the delight of God. God is actually thinking about me. I mean, I think about myself. I'm just a pretty small speck in this great big universe that God is managing. And to think God has other things to do. Do you know He's thinking about you right now? Have you ever tried counting God's thoughts towards you? David said they're so precious. I mean, I can't even number. If I could count every grain of sand on the seashore, of all the seashores of the world, they would be more than that, God's thoughts towards him. And they're precious to David. Why? Because David knows he's not lost in the sea of humanity. God is actually thinking about him personally. He actually cares. He actually wants to know what's going on in David's life. God is there in the midst of any trial that we have. He knows. He thinks about us. David said, when I awake, I'm still with you. One way you could look at this is David is meditating upon all these things we just talked about, how God was present in the mother's womb, how God knit him together and gave him his skeletal form, gave him his personality, took care of that all and ordained his days. You could think, okay, David was thinking about that, he was meditating upon that, and he was so thinking about God, he just fell asleep. And when he wakes up in the morning, God's still there and the thoughts come back to him and he's thinking about it again. That's one way you could look at it. Another way you could look at it. David's talking about he has transported us from this wild, wide world, whether it's under the sea, above the sea, where we cannot hide from God. He transports us to the mother's womb in verse 13. And the rest of the verses have to deal with being in the mother's womb. God's there, God's present, God sees, God forms, God knows his unformed substance, exactly what it's going to unwrap to look like when he's all finished in his creative process. So since we're in the mother's womb, another way you could look at this is when I awake, I come into this world, I am born. God's still with me. The whole time I was in my mother's womb, God was with me. When I awake out of what we call seeing the light of day, sometimes we talk about a birth, seeing the light of day, the first light of day. The idea is I come out of my mother's womb, God's still there. He was there in my mother's womb. He's still there in my life right now. The idea that would be that God's role as creator, sustainer, and guide doesn't change when I'm born. It continues on in life. He's there in the womb. He's there when I'm born. I like that. We are at a very critical point in our society today. Maybe it's even a little bit like Esther. When God placed her in a specific kingdom, a heathen pagan kingdom, and her role was to step forward and save the lives of the Jews. And the Bible tells us that she perhaps came for such a time as this. In 1933, the Nazi Party began its campaign against the Jews. If we got the Jews out of Germany because they are an inconvenience to us, if we got the Jews out of the way, then Germany could progress on and become great. They are an inconvenience. And he lied, and he lied, and he lied. And by 1938, the lies began to take root in the German mind. And we know what's called Kristallnacht. At Kristallnacht, they came through, broke glasses, beat up people, killed a few Jews. But that was the turning point in Germany. And because he lied, and he lied, and he lied, that was a result of the lie that was propagated and began to believe by the German people. That's what happened. They're lying to us. They've lied to us. Doctors, scientists, teachers, counselors, Those people we thought we could trust the most to tell us the truth have lied to us. And they have lied so loud and so long, we are beginning to believe the lie. The American people, who are not stupid people, have heard this lie for such a long period of time, it is commonly held as now truth. They've lied to us. And the results of their lies is that babies murdered because of a lie. We have seen in the text clearly, God is in the mother's womb. God gives personality. He forms a skeletal structure. God is present in the mother's womb the whole time that baby is growing. And they're telling us it is not a baby. They are lying to us. We see here clearly from the Word of God exactly what God is doing in that mother's womb. And we're adults here. I know there's some children. I hope that you can handle this. Listen carefully. Every time a woman goes in, God is present in her womb, forming, bringing that child to the completed state that He wants it to be. Every time a woman goes in for an abortion, they rob God. They walk right into that womb and they rob God, and God is there the whole time. What are we going to say to Him? They've lied to us. Not even a geneticist can tell the difference between the DNA of an evolving embryo or a human being to the DNA of a full-grown adult. They can't even tell the difference. At 21 days, just 3 weeks, a baby in the womb has a heartbeat already. And by 40 days, about 5 weeks, the brain waves can be detected. Now, if the absence of a heartbeat and the absence of brain waves define death today, what does their presence in the womb mean? Prior to the morning after pill, which has just recently been handed out, 99.99% of all abortions took place after the 7th week. Dr. Bernard Navison, after the invention of the ultrasound, who was a noted abortionist, saw that baby in the womb and realized, no way is it right to abort babies. It's murder. An 80-minute service that we're going to sit through today, 240 babies will be murdered because they lied to us. They lied to us. And so many people, because they've lied so loud and so long, have believed it. I hope we're not among them. I hope we can see clearly from the Word of God exactly what God's part is in the formation of every child that's born. L.R. Agnew was a professor of UCL Medical School. He gave his students this scenario. Consider the family history. Father has a venereal disease. Mother has tuberculosis. They have 4 children. First of whom was blind. Second died as an infant. The third is deaf. The fourth has tuberculosis. The mother is pregnant. Parents are willing to have an abortion if you, their doctor, recommend it. What would you do? These pre-med students overwhelmingly said, let the mother have an abortion. Professor Agnew then said, congratulations, you just murdered Beethoven. And I thought when I read that, that maybe appeals to us, it's anecdotal, it's interesting, but that's really not the point. I mean, you could go along, there's a pregnant young virgin girl who claims to be virgin, who perhaps is going to be an outcast of society. Did you abort the baby? Well, then you killed Jesus. I mean, you could go through the whole thing. That's really not the point. It's not a point whether a person contributes to society, as in Beethoven, or a person takes away from society. That's not the point. The determining point is that a person in the mother's womb or is it not? Not what they can give to society or take. And I say, according to the Word of God, it is a person designed by God. God creates us. He creates our personality, our skeletal frame, all of our organs inside. He ordains the days set before us. And that person in the mother's womb must be protected. It should, once again, be a safe place, a protected place. Teresa and I lived about 40 minutes away from Buchenwald, one of the concentration camps in Germany. Not one of the most famous ones, but it was was used. And in Buchenwald, they were out there in the woods. They were hid, and they were one of the first camps to be liberated. I think the first camp was Ohrdruf, which is kind of a subcamp of Buchenwald, and they found people in Ohrdruf, and they said, listen, we need to liberate Buchenwald. That's where the big camp is. So they went up there and they liberated Buchenwald, and when they came up, they found things like this, pictures that you're seeing right now. The American general, after liberating the camp, went down to the next city. He probably didn't, but he sent someone down to the next city, Weimar, which was very close, and he got the residents of Weimar and he said, did you know what was happening in the camp? And to a person, they said, we didn't know. He said, fine, I want to show you. Come up to the camp. So he brought them all up to the camp. Men, women, older children. Covering their faces, the stench. He had them move the dead bodies and put them in carts. While this was happening, little by little, each one of the residents of Weimar began to confess. And the end result was this. They said, when the wind blew just right and the smoke came over the city, we knew they weren't burning wood. They knew and did nothing. They knew. It was fear, sure. Fear that they would end up there. Fear there would be an inconvenience for their life. Fear that they'd have to speak up against their government. It was a fear. But they knew and did nothing. It's not a coincidence that we're alive today in January of 2008. It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that we're at perhaps a pivotal point in American history. It's not a coincidence. We have been placed here for a reason. Now, honestly, it would be a whole lot easier to ignore the issue. It's so divisive. It causes so much problems. It may inconvenience me. I may actually have to say something. It would be a whole lot easier for us to ignore it. Honestly, it would be. Let's just be honest. It'd be easy to ignore it. We have the head knowledge, the facts that God creates in the womb. He forms a personality. He knits together everything that person is going to be. Skeletal structure, length of fingers, length of toes, length of arms. It's all together in the womb. We know that theoretically. We see now from the Bible how true that is. But it would be easier just to say, I know it's true, but I don't really want to get involved. That would be easy. But the fact is, we now know, don't we? If you had any doubt prior to this day, now you do know. And now we're responsible for what we know. I didn't sleep much last night. It wasn't because I was afraid to preach this. I was excited to preach this one. I'm not trying to make you mad. That's not why I was excited. It's just such an important truth to me. But I couldn't sleep because I wrestled with this thought. What can I do? One person. Just, it's not like we got 50,000 people in our church where we have this influence in our community. We're just a small church with just everyday, ordinary people like you and me. What really can I do about this? And I didn't sleep well last night when I was thinking about that. And you're probably asking the same question now. What can I do? Really, what can I do? Well, number one, if you haven't already, you can pray for this evil to stop. You can pray. You can pray for a miracle of God because people are not listening to those with the truth. Pray. Second thing you can do is it's perhaps time to be an Esther. It's time to speak up. We've cowered behind our intellectual knowledge for a long period of time, but have never raised our voices. And we wonder why no one's listening, because we're not talking. It's time for us perhaps to say something. I'm not talking about going out and purposely offending people and telling them they're going to burn in hell. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about standing up and saying what the truth is. God is there in the womb. From the very beginning, God is there. Third thing perhaps you can do is, or we can do, is volunteer for some ministry organization that's involved in this. Somewhere, wherever, I don't know. Wherever God would lead you. Somewhere where your voice can be heard and your hands can be used and your intellect that God has given to you and your wisdom can be put into place to make a difference in somebody's life. Now, the fourth thing is I would never ever presume to ever tell you by name which candidate to vote for in any election. I'll never do that, ever. I'll never tell you a party to vote for. I'll never tell you anything. But I will say this, as a general, broad, spreading principle. You can vote for candidates who will fight for this on the political level. Whichever party. I don't care. I'm not talking about parties. I'm talking about a candidate on the political level who will fight for this to see this evil stopped. Your voice can be heard that way. And the fifth one is probably the most important one. These all four are very important, don't get me wrong. But the fifth one is probably the most important thing that will have the greatest impact for changing this evil in our society. And number 5 is this: evangelize. We've got to change hearts. If we change hearts and people start listening to God, they're less likely to listen to the lie that's out there today. That our society is trying to conform us to this age and make us think just like they think. They're believing the lie. They're sucking it down. We're saying, no, that's not true. If we change hearts through the gospel message, then we have a greater chance of changing society. Number 5 is the best one. If you didn't know before what you know now, you now know. So the question for us is this: we know, what will we do? We cannot play ignorant any longer. We cannot stand on the fence and say, I'm against abortion, but if someone else wants to choose it, that's their business. We cannot stand there. We have to say, a baby in the mother's womb is created and designed by God from conception till it comes into this world. God is present in the womb. And every time we terminate that pregnancy, we are robbing God of what is rightfully His. We cannot stand on the fence any longer. We cannot. What role can you play? Perhaps it's being compassionate to a young lady who has an unplanned pregnancy. She just needs someone to listen to and counsel. She may actually need to live in your house for a while. I don't know. But it's time we do something. It's time to be an Esther. It's time to be heard. Let's pray. Father, I don't know how we can escape the judgment that's coming upon the society. For the sake of convenience, we throw away what is yours. And we don't seem to care. My life will be better without it. That's what they're told. And the streets of Jerusalem ran with blood, innocent blood. Judgment came upon the nation. I don't want that to happen to this country. Oh, we're not perfect. But there are privileges and opportunities in this country that other countries don't have. I just want to change. We need you. We need you to act, to strengthen us, to embolden us. We need change. Work in us, Father. Give us a compassion for people, all people, even unborn people. I pray in Jesus' name. I left the last 2 verses of this psalm. These were David's meditation about all the things that he had just heard about God. God knew him. Can't hide from God. God's all powerful. He created him. He concluded this as his meditation, as his prayer. And I'd like it to make it our prayer this morning. These 2 verses here. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. And see if there be any grievous or any wicked way in me. and lead me in the way everlasting. The church says, God bless you.